Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we are going to talk about a question for you. A question for you to answer to yourself. And then a question that came in from France and foreign policy. And how sometimes things just don't make any sense at first glance. And kind of go over what these developments really mean. When I ask this first question, remember your answer for the rest of the video. What country on this planet is the absolute most militaristic? The one ready to go to war at the drop of a hat. The one that really never shows restraint. The one that has a maze of military installations all over the world because war, that is just their jam. That's what they do. Keep your answer in mind as I read this question. Okay, so it says, I'm sorry, I'm French. You say Biden is confusing Americans. Our president is also talking from his mouth and, well, not his mouth. It says something else. He says a peace dialogue must start again, and then says to expand our war against the group that the coalition is fighting in Iraq and Syria. I know President Trump said that they were defeated, but here in the real world, there's still an active campaign against them. And in fact, just recently, I want to say in like the last 24 hours, they engaged in a hit in eastern Congo with like 26 people lost. Of course, that's not making the news because, as we talked about before, when an area is deprioritized for foreign policy, well, we don't really respond very much. It's kind of thoughts and prayers. Okay, so he uses a term there. It's not the group's name, but it's definitely not a term I can say on YouTube. So it says, he says a peace dialogue must start again, and then says to expand our war against the group in Iraq and Syria to include the attackers from Palestine. This is not our war. What is he doing? Okay, so for Americans, please just take note. The French have adopted a more militaristic standpoint than the United States on this. The French government has a more hawkish position than the U.S. It's important to note that. At the same time, to answer the question, he's doing the exact same thing Biden is. He's doing the same thing as Biden is. He is trying to avoid a much larger war. And I know that doesn't make any sense. So what he's saying is that the peace process, it has to restart for real. And there has to be real conversations, and it has to move forward because militarily there's not really a solution here. Something else that he said that isn't in the message, but it's important, is roughly Israel should prosecute its war without mercy. But that doesn't mean without rules. And then he suggests widening the coalition. Okay, so Israel is not part of that coalition. Israel is not part of the coalition that is active against the group in Iraq and Syria. If that coalition expanded the scope of their mission to include groups from Palestine, who suddenly gets a whole lot more influence over how that war is prosecuted? The guys from MacDill, U.S. Army Special Operations, or not U.S. Army, just U.S. Special Operations. And their very first piece of advice is going to be do not do a major ground offensive. That's going to be the first piece of advice. It's still an Israeli operation. It would still be an Israeli thing. The U.S. wouldn't be calling the shots in any way. But the advice, the influence would be there, and it would be much greater than it is right now. That's what he's angling for. I personally think there's probably better ways to get that influence. But that is undoubtedly the goal. The goal is to try to stop this war from spreading. People are looking at it right now and being like, this is horrible. And it is. That's not in dispute. It can get worse, a lot worse. It can spread to other countries. In which case, if Israel is having to engage other countries, they are going to be more unrestrained. So the goal is to try to stop the conflict from spreading. Do I think the route the French president took is the best route? No, I don't. I understand it, but I think there's better ways to get the influence. But that's what's happening. And again, for Americans, the French have adopted a more hawkish position than the United States. I know people want to talk about the moral implications and all of the horror, and I get it. But from a foreign policy standpoint, please remember Israel is an ally. The fact that the U.S. didn't go in guns blazing is amazing. The calls for restraint, they're showing up more and more frequently. And it's to stop the conflict from spreading. My guess is that very soon we will probably start hearing about countries that you might not expect, maybe China, to also start playing a role. Now, they may play it from a different side, but the goal would be to stop the conflict from spreading. And that's what's going on. Expect to see a whole bunch of world leaders talk out of their mouth and somewhere else at the same time. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.